Dusky Sound, on the southwest corner of New Zealand. Nearly 200 years ago, the great navigator James Cook, RN, refitted ship in the shelter of a fjord. He was closely followed by whalers and sealers, who set up their shore stations along the rocky coast. Where the Upper Rima River meets Foveaux Strait, the settlement of Riverton remains as a monument to those hardy pioneers, the sealers and whalers, the first real settlers in the bounteous southern province. Pushing inland, these first Europeans discovered the great forests, so vast that today, over 100 years later, men with power saws and bulldozers are still working virgin bush for Southland Beach. Great areas of rolling tussock land were taken up by early Scottish settlers, who raised huge flocks of sheep and cattle. Today, these pastoral empires go under the plough to make way for closer settlement. But the mark of those prudent pioneers is stamped for all time on the character of Southland. New Zealand's current pioneers are the men of the agricultural aviation industry, the aerial top dressers. Taking off from pint-sized airstrips on hill country stations, they're building up the productivity of the more inaccessible areas. There's wealth underground, too. In the nightcaps and Ojai districts, where thick seams are near the surface, a lot of good coal comes from open cast mining. But the bulk of it is still hewn underground. Stretching out into the heavy cropping country, the railways of Southland keep the produce on the move. On Ram Hill Flat in the Nokamai, Chewings fescue is being harvested. Developed locally by Guy Chewings, this strain of grass seed is one of the varieties that has brought world recognition to Southland. In 1867, gold was discovered in the district, but it soon ran out. Some old-timers stayed on to build and cultivate. To them, Southland owes its pattern of serenity. The Irving, Acton, Oswald, Dilston and Cromell are rivers that give this district its name. 5 rivers. Beyond the windrows of oats, a field of red clover lies ripening. Before cars and tractors drove horses from the rural scene, Southland grew most of New Zealand's oats, and still today, record yields of around 150 bushels an acre are harvested. In this southern province, there are more sheep and cattle than there are people in the whole of New Zealand. These belted Galloways and crossbreds are moving down from winter turnips to new spring pastures. Winter feeding of turnips and other root crops figures highly in the success of Southland's meat export industry. Scientific pasture management has produced land which will carry as many as 10 ewes to the acre. and twin lambs are the rule rather than the exception. A million acres of fertile plainland, and in the middle, astride the Matara River, the prosperous town of Gore, second largest in the province. Ayrshires at Ingleside Stud give an annual yield of over 400 pounds of butterfat. Around 10,000 tons of cheese a year is produced in Southland. It was in Southland, too, that New Zealand's butter industry was pioneered. In the 1880s, Carl Anderson was brought from Denmark to Edendale to set up the country's first butter factory. In the flush of the season, this factory at Underwood collects over 20,000 gallons of fresh milk a day, to be sent out again as condensed milk. On the banks of the Matara River, the Southland Frozen Meat Export Company's works, one of several freezing works in the province. In 1881, New Zealand's meat export industry was established with a shipment of about 5,000 carcasses of mutton and lamb. Today, Southland alone sends away the staggering total of over 2.5 million carcasses a year. Out on the unusually calm waters of Foveaux Strait, boats of the Bluff oyster fleet, in new paint for a new season, strain at the taut lines of the dredges. $6 million dozen oysters a season is what they bring in, every one of them touched by human hand as they're sorted. Good ones into the box, and the rest back over the side. About the time the oyster season starts, millions of seabirds skim the coastal waters in search of fish. The sooty shearwater, better known as mutton birds, have arrived for the breeding season. Long ago, the Maoris, in seagoing canoes, used to voyage down to the island nesting grounds to gather the young birds for winter food. Nowadays, they travel to their hereditary islands by fishing and coastal boats. Landing facilities just don't exist on the islands, so which party goes ashore first depends on wind and tide. Conditions are right for Murderer's Cove on Big South Cape. Provisions for 10 weeks or more, sacks of salt to preserve the birds, cans to pack them in, roofing iron, pieces of furniture, the kitchen sink, everything is stowed aboard the surfboat. And on top of it all, the birders steam off in precarious state. Islands are so smooth to land on, though. Foveaux, or Evening Island, as Cook named it, off the southern tip of Stewart Island, is one that can offer a most inhospitable welcome to the yearly invaders who come to disturb its lazy tranquility. The spongy peat floors of the Titi Islands are tunneled like rabbit warrens, and year after year the birds come back to the same burrows to nest. It's not the parent birds that are taken, but the fat, downy 6-week-old chick, who catches his first and only glimpse of daylight before becoming a highly prized delicacy for epicures. Some of the connoisseurs amongst the birders shun the current trend of packing their birds in cans and stick to the traditional way of making bags from bull kelp, gathered from the island's rocky shores. Known to the Maoris as Rakiura, land of the glowing skies, Stewart Island was a thriving settlement in the whaling days. Now fishing and catering for tourists are its only industries, but its golden beaches, its air of serenity and unspoiled scenic beauty attract those in search of a really peaceful holiday. Little remains today as a reminder of its early history, but in 1809, Captain William Stewart circumnavigated the island and later started a flourishing shipbuilding business before the first settler had arrived on the mainland. Stretching deep into the island, Patterson Inlet gives sanctuary to many kinds of native birds. A bushwhacker goes beachcombing for food. Overhead, a white-throated shag, its gullet filled with tiny fish, comes home to feed its young. On the eastern side of the island, around the waters of Port Adventure, lines are dropped to catch blue cod. Pull up as many fish as there are hooks on the line. These cod must be as hungry as the mollymawks, skimming the surface for scraps. Just a couple of hours by steamer across Foveaux Strait from Bluff, and hundreds of holiday makers jostle ashore at Half Moon Bay into an atmosphere that's changed so little in 100 years. But in Invercargill, capital of Southland, time has made a world of difference. Named after Captain Cargill, leader of the Otago settlers, the town was founded in 1856. Provincial rivalry reaches its peak in the rugby season when Southland meets Otago. people are not content to be merely onlookers. On the sidelines today, they'll be active tomorrow in one of the many outdoor pastimes the province provides. A day's walk along the bush tracks from Lake Manapuri, over 2,000-foot Wilmot Pass, ends at Deep Cove on Doubtful Sound. From the mouth of the Livia River, the still waters of the Sound reach 26 miles out to the Tasman Sea. There's still unexplored country hidden among the peaks and ravines of Fiordland National Park's 3.5 million acres. Sportsmen from many countries come here for the deer stalking and the fishing. In the Waiau River, the angler has a choice of rainbow, brown trout, and Atlantic salmon. As a hunting ground for sportsmen, Southland has but few rivals anywhere. And to travel the bush-fringed road winding between snow-capped peaks to Milford Sound is to become host to an everlasting memory of rugged beauty. Up the Hollyford Valley to the mouth of the Homer Tunnel, 3/4 of a mile through this once solid barrier of granite. No shortcuts for the pioneers. They had to come over the top. But in 1953, the tunnel was opened, and 6 tortuous miles through the Cledar Canyon now lead the traveler to the end of the road and the majesty of Milford Sound. Framed in the hotel window, the glacier-scarred walls of Mitre Peak reach nearly 6,000 feet above the waters of the fjord. Fiordland's prolific rainfall can turn in an hour or two the smallest trickle into a thundering cascade. The waters of the Darren Range converge to feed the 500-foot spill of the Bowen Falls. Sutherland, McKinnon, Homer, and Mackay, names in Southland history. Although dwarfed by the splendor of mighty Sheerdown Peak, Hotel Milford is no small tribute to the tenacity of those adventurous pioneers who blazed the trail over the mountains to these western fjords. East of the mountains, other pioneers with the same purposeful spirit have ploughed into the yielding plains of Southland a broad and lasting pattern of prosperity.